Imagine a weapon moving so fast it tears the air apart. A missile traveling at more than 1 mile every single second. At Mach 5, the friction of the atmosphere literally superheats the air around the warhead, wrapping it in a blinding shield of glowing plasma. For years, military commanders in the United States have looked at this weapon, the hypersonic missile, and quietly accepted a terrifying reality. It is unstoppable. You cannot shoot it down. Traditional radar cannot track it fast enough, and standard interceptor missiles are simply too slow to catch it. It was supposed to be the ultimate trump card of the 21st century. Until right now. Deep inside China, researchers just successfully tested something that turns that unstoppable missile into falling scrap metal. They have built a giant, artificial intelligence-powered laser defense array capable of firing a continuous beam of high-energy light directly through the atmosphere, melting a hypersonic target in milliseconds. This is not science fiction. This is not a concept drawing sitting on a whiteboard. This is a tested, functional system that uses advanced machine learning to bend light, perfectly tracking a target moving at unthinkable speeds, and frying its internal guidance systems before it even knows it is being hit. For decades, the United States has relied on the simple fact that its multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers and advanced missiles could project power anywhere on the globe. But this new Chinese array completely flips the script. You are looking at a system that uses the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, to swat down the very weapons the world thought were invincible. When you realize what this actually means, it changes everything you know about modern defense. But to truly understand why this AI laser is such a massive world-shifting breakthrough, you cannot just look at the laser itself. You have to understand the sheer, terrifying physics of the missile it was built to destroy. Because you cannot understand why this new laser defense array is an absolute game-changer until you understand exactly why the hypersonic missile was supposed to be invincible in the first place. To truly grasp the level of panic inside Washington right now, you need to picture a massive American aircraft carrier out on the open water. These floating cities are the ultimate symbol of U.S. military power. They house thousands of sailors, dozens of fighter jets, and cost over $13 billion to build. For the last 80 years, they have ruled the oceans because they are surrounded by an impenetrable bubble of defense. Cruisers, destroyers, and airborne radar systems monitor the sky for hundreds of miles. If an enemy fires a standard missile, the carrier group sees it coming minutes in advance. They calculate its path, fire a defense interceptor, and blow it out of the sky. It is a mathematical certainty. But a hypersonic missile completely breaks that math. When a weapon travels at Mach 5, over 3,800 miles per hour, it behaves differently than anything else on Earth. The friction of the air is so intense that it strips electrons from the oxygen molecules around the missile. This creates a plasma cloud. That glowing cloud of superheated gas acts like a cloak. It absorbs and scatters traditional radar waves. The missile effectively becomes invisible. By the time a ship's defense systems finally lock onto it, the weapon is already in the terminal phase. At that point, it is literally seconds away from a catastrophic impact. You cannot fire a defense missile to catch it, because the target is simply moving too fast. This is the nightmare scenario keeping U.S. defense officials awake at night. A $13 billion aircraft carrier, the absolute pride of the American naval fleet, can be turned into a sinking, burning graveyard by a single, untrackable weapon. For years, the Pentagon knew this was the ultimate vulnerability. The defense industry tried to build faster interceptor missiles, better radar, and smarter computer systems, but they were fighting a losing battle against the raw laws of physics. You cannot beat an object moving at Mach 5 with another physical object that needs time to launch, turn, and accelerate. If you want to shoot down a weapon moving at the absolute limits of physical speed, you cannot simply use traditional physical ammunition like we have always done. You need something that doesn't just move fast. You need something that moves instantly. You need a weapon that operates completely outside the physical constraints of traditional combat. You need to figure out how to harness the raw power of light. To stop a hypersonic missile, you have to throw out the entire playbook of modern warfare. When an object is screaming through the sky at over a mile a second, trying to hit it with another missile is like trying to shoot a bullet out of the air with a second bullet while completely blindfolded. The physical math simply does not work in your favor. But light plays by completely different rules. A laser beam travels at exactly 186,000 miles per second. At that incredible speed, the incoming target is practically standing perfectly still. The moment you pull the trigger, the destructive energy is already there. There is no flight time. The beam just connects. But here is the brutal reality of directed energy physics. Hitting the target is not the hard part. The problem is what happens after the beam connects. A hypersonic missile is built to survive a trip through absolute hell. The weapon is covered in advanced thermal shielding, designed to withstand temperatures hot enough to melt solid steel. If you hit that heavy shield with a basic laser, the missile brushes it off like a flashlight hitting a brick wall. To actually destroy it, you have to hold a beam so unimaginably intense that it burns right through the armor, penetrates the hull, and fries the internal navigation chips before the missile can adjust. And you cannot just flash the laser for a microsecond. You must hold that blinding beam perfectly steady on one specific spot, a target the size of a dinner plate, while the weapon moves at thousands of miles an hour. Imagine trying to keep a laser pointer focused on a single coin attached to a speeding race car from 10 miles away. If the beam jitters or slides off the sweet spot for even a fraction of a second, the heat instantly dissipates. The metal cools down, and the missile just keeps flying toward you. That level of sustained physical precision is where human engineering hits a massive brick wall. Because between the laser array on the ground and the missile in the sky, there is a chaotic, invisible enemy, the Earth's atmosphere. Firing a laser through the open air is like shining a flashlight through a heavily moving swimming pool. The wind, the heavy moisture, the dust, and the rapid temperature changes all violently scatter the light. You can have the most powerful laser ever built, but if the beam distorts in the clouds, it becomes completely useless. This is exactly where the hardware stops working. And this is exactly where the artificial intelligence takes over. For decades, the American military tried to make high-powered lasers work, and they kept running into the exact same frustrating wall. The atmosphere is a messy, chaotic soup of moving air. When you fire a concentrated beam of light through miles of wind, humidity, and varying temperatures, the beam spreads out. It loses its deadly focus. What starts as a tightly packed punch of destructive heat ends up as a blurry, harmless smudge by the time it reaches the target. It is known as the atmospheric trap, and for a long time, defense experts believed it made long-range laser interception physically impossible. But the breakthrough that changed everything didn't happen in a traditional weapons lab. It happened in the world of artificial intelligence. Chinese engineers realized that you cannot beat the atmosphere just by building a bigger, stronger laser. You have to outsmart the sky itself. So, they handed the problem over to machine learning. They built a massive AI brain designed to do one highly specific thing: read the chaotic movement of the atmosphere in real time. This system uses invisible sensor beams to instantly map the air ahead of the weapon, calculating wind speed, air density, and moisture at millions of individual points along the flight path. Then, the AI does something that sounds almost like pure magic. In a fraction of a millisecond, it calculates exactly how the atmosphere is going to distort the weapon's beam. Before the main laser even fires, the system physically morphs the shape of the light. It uses ultra-fast adaptive optics, mirrors that constantly change their physical shape thousands of times every single second, to pre-distort the beam. It purposely fires a weirdly shaped, uneven laser, knowing that as it travels through the turbulent air, the wind and moisture will actually push the light back together. By the time it hits the hypersonic missile miles away, it is a perfectly focused, intensely devastating pinpoint of pure heat. The AI is constantly reading the sky, predicting the atmospheric turbulence, and adjusting the shot faster than human thought. It takes an impossible physics problem and completely solves it with raw computing power, locking a perfect beam onto a target moving 5 times the speed of sound. This advanced software is what turns a giant flashlight into a true missile killer. But having the smartest targeting software in the world is only half the battle. Knowing how to perfectly aim the beam is useless if you don't have enough juice to actually melt the metal. To destroy a modern hypersonic weapon, you need an apocalyptic amount of raw power. So, where does all that energy actually come from? To melt a hypersonic missile in midair, you cannot just plug this laser into a normal wall outlet. The amount of electricity required is almost impossible to wrap your head around. Imagine taking all the electrical power needed to run a small American city, every house, every streetlight, every factory, and squeezing all of that energy into a single, blinding flash that lasts for just a fraction of a second. That is the kind of brutal, raw power we are talking about. Traditional generators simply cannot dump that much electricity that fast. If you try to force it, the cables instantly melt, the circuits explode, and the entire system burns itself to the ground. For years, this massive energy trap stopped laser weapons from becoming a reality. You could build the laser, but you could not power it safely. Chinese engineers solved this by developing an entirely new generation of advanced supercapacitors. Think of a normal battery like a slowly dripping water faucet. It gives you energy steadily over a long period of time. A supercapacitor is like a massive dam breaking all at once. It stores a massive ocean of electrical energy and dumps it instantly without destroying the system. The array charges up quietly in the background, holding a staggering amount of lethal power, just waiting for the AI brain to pull the trigger. But dumping that much raw power creates a massive, deadly side effect. Heat. When you generate the energy of a microsun inside a metal machine, the laser array itself naturally wants to melt into a puddle of glowing liquid. To keep the machine from completely destroying itself during a strike, engineers had to design a revolutionary thermal management system. They built complex cooling channels directly into the hardware, pumping specialized chemical fluids through the system at incredibly high speeds to instantly pull the boiling heat away from the laser core. It is an absolute miracle of extreme thermal engineering. The system fires. The boiling heat is perfectly managed. The hypersonic target is completely destroyed. It is a stunning human achievement in physics, software, and raw power generation. But the most terrifying part of this new defense array is not the giant laser beam. It is not the advanced AI brain tracking the sky. The real reason this technology is completely terrifying to American military planners comes down to a much simpler, far more brutal factor: economics. A modern hypersonic or advanced cruise missile is a masterpiece of engineering, but it comes with a devastating price tag. Every time the United States fires one of these weapons, they are burning tens of millions of dollars. Some of these highly advanced missiles cost up to $50 million for a single shot. That is not just a weapon. That is the budget of a small town packed into a single metal tube. When you launch it, it is gone forever. You can only carry a limited number of these massive weapons on a ship, and you can only afford to build so many before the national defense budget starts to severely bleed. Now, compare that to the Chinese artificial intelligence laser array. The laser does not use physical ammunition. It does not need a rocket motor, it does not need highly expensive titanium parts, and it does not need a team of factory workers spending months to assemble it. The only ammunition the laser requires is electricity, and electricity is extraordinarily cheap. When the AI locks onto a target and the system dumps its massive energy payload, the cost of that single, devastating shot is roughly $10. Yes, you actually heard that correctly. Just $10 American dollars. The exact same cost as a fast food lunch. This is not just a technological shift. This is an absolute economic slaughter. In the history of modern warfare, the country with the most money usually wins. If you can afford to build more weapons than the other guy, you overwhelm them. But this directed energy laser completely breaks that historical financial rule. If the United States fires a $50 million hypersonic missile and China shoots it down for $10, the US is losing an impossible financial war. If the US fires 10 missiles, they lose $500 million. The defense array simply pulls $100 of power from the electrical grid and keeps firing. This creates what military strategists call an infinite magazine. An American ship will eventually run out of defense interceptors and offensive rockets. It has to sail back to a friendly port to safely reload. But a ground-based laser never runs out of bullets. As long as the generators have fuel and the supercapacitors can pull electricity, the AI brain can just keep melting targets out of the sky all day long. You simply cannot overwhelm a system that never has to reload its weapons. When the basic math of global combat changes this drastically, the geopolitical map of the entire world is instantly rewritten. And for the United States military, that brutal rewriting is currently happening in the absolute worst possible place on the planet. For over 80 years, the entire strategy of the United States military has been built on one single idea: power projection. If there is a problem anywhere in the world, the US does not wait for the problem to come to its shores. It sends massive floating military bases, the aircraft carriers, directly to the enemy's front door. In the Pacific Ocean, this strategy is absolutely everything. The US relies on sending these incredibly expensive carrier strike groups deep into Asian waters to protect allies, secure international trade routes, and remind everyone exactly who is in charge of the global order. It works beautifully because, historically, nobody wants to mess with an American aircraft carrier. But this giant AI laser defense array completely shatters that American strategy. Imagine you are an American admiral commanding a massive naval fleet in the Pacific right now. Your entire power depends on the threat of your missiles and your advanced fighter jets. Now, imagine realizing that the airspace you are trying to threaten is suddenly covered by an invisible, impenetrable dome of laser light. The Chinese military does not need to build a navy that is bigger than the American Navy to win a war. They do not even need to send their ships out into the deep ocean to fight. They just need to safely park these infinitely firing AI lasers all along their coastline and wait. If the US tries to launch an incredibly expensive hypersonic weapon or a massive swarm of advanced cruise missiles from a ship, the artificial intelligence tracks them instantly. The supercapacitors dump their massive energy, the laser fires, and $50 million of American taxpayer money simply falls into the ocean as burning metal. The defense cost is $10. Instantly, the mighty aircraft carrier becomes completely useless. You cannot bomb a coastal target if your bombs simply melt before they get anywhere near the land. And if an aircraft carrier cannot safely project power, it is no longer the ultimate weapon of global dominance. It just becomes a giant, highly vulnerable, slow-moving target floating in the dangerous water. This is exactly why the Pentagon is looking at this new AI laser technology with pure dread. It completely neutralizes the classic American way of fighting. You can have the most expensive ships, the best trained sailors, and the most advanced hypersonic missiles ever built by human hands. But none of that matters if your opponent can literally use the speed of light to turn your absolute best weapons to ash for the price of a cheap lunch. This brings us to the ultimate, chilling conclusion of what this technology actually means for the next 10 years. For thousands of years, the entire history of human warfare has been defined by one simple concept: the explosion. From the very first gunpowder rockets invented centuries ago, to the massive artillery shells of the world wars, all the way up to the modern, multi-million-dollar hypersonic missiles of today, the logic was always exactly the same. You pack as much explosive chemical energy as possible into a physical metal container, and you throw it at your enemy as hard and as fast as you possibly can. The side that could throw the biggest, fastest explosion always won the fight. But that era is now officially over. We are completely leaving the age of physical explosions, and we are rapidly entering the terrifying new era of light. When artificial intelligence learns how to perfectly read the chaotic atmosphere, and engineers learn how to safely dump the power of a small city into a single beam, the physical missile becomes obsolete. We are moving into a world where the side that masters the photon will completely control the sky. You cannot outrun light. You cannot armor a missile thick enough to survive a microsun. And you absolutely cannot win a financial war when your enemy is shooting down your $50 million weapons for the price of a $10 electrical charge. The United States military built the greatest, most expensive physical war machine in human history. But they are now facing an adversary that has figured out how to make that physical machinery irrelevant. The rules of the game have not just changed. The old game has been completely deleted. If this shift in global power and technology opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe right now so you do not miss what we cover next. But before you go, I want to hear from you. If laser defense makes traditional missiles completely useless, how does America protect its aircraft carriers over the next decade? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one.